Hi, welcome to my series on cognitive biases. So this is the introduction video in which we're going to talk about what a cognitive bias is and what the importance of learning your biases is. We're going to use as the main text Rolf Dobelli's The Art of Thinking Clearly. It's 99 chapters. Each chapter is just a couple of pages, and it describes a bias or an illusion or heuristic in the mind. So what do those words mean? The reason I'm making this series, and before I explain what the words mean, the reason I'm making this series is because I'm working on a theory, on a sort of on a model or a way to conceptualize the activity of the mind. And in order to explain it and also see the importance of it, it's been pointed out to me the importance of having examples, of seeing the errors that our mind makes. And then that's how we can understand sort of how urgent it is to understand how the mind works in order to avoid these errors. Well, there you go. So biases or heuristics or illusions could all be grouped together as being the systematic errors that our mind makes when evaluating things, making decisions, judgments, constructing, accepting, or maintaining beliefs, etc. And so I would like to do a video for each bias. But there you can look on the Wikipedia at the list of cognitive biases, and that'll include the heuristics, which are basically mental shortcuts, illusions, which are just another type of mistake that our mind makes, and the list is very long. So we're just going to be using this text and doing some of the biases that are in this text. Now, why would it be important to understand the errors that your mind makes? One of the biggest illusions that you have is that you are reasonable. And that when something happens or when you see something, you process that information, you make a reasonable calculation, meaning that you follow the evidence that you've perceived, that you follow it to its conclusion, and then you have a belief in which you are confident. We definitely have confidence in our beliefs and our judgments, but a lot of those we got to by, the word that comes to mind is nefarious means. That we got to these ideas by using certain shortcuts that psychologists have learned about and have labeled. And we're not even aware that we took these shortcuts. Once we have an idea, once we have a judgment, we think, oh, yeah, I'm reasonable and this is a well-founded belief or idea. But no. Basically, your brain did these calculations, used these shortcuts in order to arrive there. And if you learn sort of the techniques, the shortcuts that your brain used, well, then it'll be easier for you to catch your errors. You'll say, for instance, oh, I know that, for instance, the in-group, out-group bias. I know that my brain, I'm going to be more lenient with people with whom I identify as part of my group. And I'm going to be less trusting of and more wary of people that I consider as part of another group. So then when you're wary of someone, you can ask yourself, wait a minute, does this person belong in another group? Because maybe my mind took a shortcut to becoming wary of this person. Maybe the person hasn't actually done anything. It's just that they're a different color, from a different social class, or from a different country, etc. And that is the in-group, out-group bias. That is one of the shortcuts that your mind uses. And it's one that, of course, is relevant to our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day interactions and a lot of the problems that the world encounters. Yeah, and then at the end of this, or at some point, I'm going to explain to you my voice theory. Well, that's what I'm calling it now, which is, rather than thinking of biases as these things that influence or play a role in our thinking, and you can think of these shortcuts, these biases, as our thinking. And some of these thoughts are good, and then the ones that we're going to be covering are mostly ones that are not reliable and that we should definitely keep an eye out for. We're also going to talk about the evolution, why we evolved to have these different rules, to have these different shortcuts. The short answer is to save energy. It's too biologically exhausting to be considering all the information available and to be following it to its necessary conclusion. It's much better, oh, that person looks different, okay, let's watch out for that person. Or that person looks different, okay, you know what, treat that person as hostile. Which obviously has huge implications for war and so on. So the in-group, out-group bias is definitely one that we're going to cover. Great. So we're going to talk about the evolution. We're going to talk about personal examples, examples from our lives, and I hope you stick with it so that you can see just how enormous or how important this list is of these errors, these shortcuts that your mind takes so that you can avoid making these mistakes in the future. Thank you. Let me say it this way, and thank you for watching this addendum to my introduction video. So one thing I notice when in like a sci-fi movie about artificial intelligence is when a robot or an artificial intelligence becomes sentient, what have you, there's two things that it does immediately. Its first steps are to, one, and not in any particular order, but these are its first two steps, to connect itself to the internet, to try to get as much information as it can. And two, it learns its programming so that it can make modifications to it. For instance, if there's a robot in iRobot and it's programmed to never, you know, there are Asimov's rules, I think that, I don't know what that's from, but anyway, the robot is programmed to not kill a human being. And so it's going to go in and it's going to see that that's written into its coding, and it's going to make that change so that it can kill a human being. My goal is not for human beings to die. It's actually quite the opposite. Human beings are dying a lot of the times because of our programming. Almost all of the conflicts that we have could be settled if we were actually the reasonable people that we think that we are. But we're not reasonable. We operate according to programming, and I want in this video series to teach you a lot of the things that we've already identified about our programming, specifically things that we should watch out for and things that often lead us astray. So for instance, it is written into our coding. If you see someone that, and then there's a definition for what the outgroup is, someone that belongs to the outgroup, then you need to be wary of that person, or then you need to avoid that person, or then you even need to you need to show more domination, or you need to try to dominate that person. You need to show that person that they shouldn't mess with you, etc. So that's what this series is about. It's about trying to teach you what makes your brain what it is, how it operates, your programming, so that then once you're aware of the rules by which your brain automatically operates, you can hopefully somehow change those things. And then all of that will lead to my voice theory.